Linux from scratch is one of those endeavors I think every single Linux user should go through. You're probably going to hate it. You're probably not going to use it long term. Very likely, you're not even going to finish it because you get bored. But it's an experience that is worth having. It takes you from bootstrapping your system, and if you do the follow-up books, even having an installed desktop, getting gaming working, and along the way, all of this is being done basically through manual steps. The most automated build tooling you're gonna get is a makefile. And at least for the official books, there is a couple to go through. Beyond Linux from scratch, automated Linux from scratch, multi-lib, gaming, and supplemental. You don't have to do any of these. You can pick and choose the ones you want, but all of these are derived from the core Linux from scratch book. I say core, but there are multiple versions of this book. You have the main stable version. This uses SysVinit. You also have the secondary stable version, the systemd version. Although this one's not going to be secondary for much longer. Most of the contents are pretty much identical because most things don't rely on your init system or anything that systemd might provide. But it's very important to have these as separate material because if you're doing systemd, the stuff that is systemd is very different from SysVinit. However, there's a problem. Linux from scratch abandoning SysVinit support. Now, being Linux from scratch, obviously, it's not actually abandoning support, right? It's not a Fedora, it's not Ubuntu where, somebody is packaging that for you and doing all the nice things for you. This is instructions on how to build everything from upstream. So, what's not being supported is the book anymore, is the instructions on how to do things any further. The original announcement was made over on their Discord. There will be a more formal post on the mailing list, and we'll check that out in just a moment. But the upcoming stable release 13.0 will be systemd only. The original plan was to drop SysVinit in favor of OpenRC as the main version of LFS and keep systemd. We had asked for some feedback earlier about this. We value feedback and the opinions of the community a ton, but as editors, we are stretched thin. Having another init system besides systemd has been estimated to lead to 300 plus hours being spent on the extra revision alone, and this could be an underestimate. That book in question is this one. If we go to development, give it a second. This is the OpenRC book. Again, most of the content are going to be like the main book, but if you search for any section regarding OpenRC, then you have OpenRC configuration and various other things that are going to be important for that. That being said, we heavily encourage users who want SysVinit or OpenRC to carry the effort and potentially make forks that are up to date. This support may not be dropped forever, but until we have more helping hands, we are unable to provide the support like we have in the past. And here's that announcement on the mailing list. This was made by Bruce Stubbs, the primary maintainer of the LFS book. With some regret, LFS and BLFS will no longer be developing the systemv versions of the books. There are two reasons for this decision. The first reason is workload. No one working on LFS is paid. If you've seen my Debian video, I don't know if that's going to be out by the time I upload this. Very similar problem here. We rely completely on volunteers. In LFS, there are 88 packages. In BLFS, there are over 1,000. The volume of changes from upstream is overwhelming editors. In this release cycle that started on the 1st of September until now, there have been 70 commits to LFS and 1,155 commits to BLFS and counting. When making package updates, many packages need to be checked for both systemv and systemd. When preparing for release, all packages need to be checked for each init system. The second reason for dropping systemv is that packages like GNOME and soon KDE Plasmas are building requirements that require capabilities in systemd that are not in systemv. This is still not true for KDE Plasma. I know people still keep thinking it is. It's just gonna be for the Plasma Login Manager. It is true for GNOME, and if they do want to use the Plasma Login Manager, yes, but you don't have to use the Plasma Login Manager. This could potentially be worked around with another init system like OpenRC, but beyond the transition process, it still does not address the ongoing workload problem. So there is someone who has managed to get GNOME working with OpenRC post those changes, But that's just those changes. There's going to be additional changes in the future, and then things break again, and it just becomes this whole mess of, okay, we need to fix this, they change something, we need to fix this, change, fix, and at some point you say, do we just give up and use the thing they are building around? The next version of LFS, which is not going to have SysV, is scheduled for March 1st, so a bit less than 20 or so days away. They're not going to delete the books, okay? Those books are still going to remain available, and for the most part, are still going to work. But they're not going to be tested by the LFS editors. So if somebody wants to get involved and take over those books, they can absolutely do so. To be very clear, this is solely a workload problem. This is not being done because the author just hates SysVinit and no longer wants it around. As a personal note, I do not like this decision. To me, LFS is about learning how a system works. Understanding the boot process is a big part of that. Systemd is about 1678 C files, plus many data files. SysV is 22 C files, and about 50 short bash scripts and data files. Yes, Systemd provides a lot of capabilities, but we'll be losing some things I consider important. However, the decision needs to be made. This is being done because there is not enough time to maintain both books. This is not being done because SysVinit bad, Systemd good, before anybody wants to start that argument. Now, this is not the only way this could have been handled, and we will get to that. In response to this, there has been some internal discussion, is the nice way to say it. Some not exactly happy people is another way. Frustrating. I personally do not like Systemd at all. I understand that Systemd did not prove its main claim to be faster than SystemV on boot. I know people still like to talk about that, but not true. But anyway, not important. I really appreciate the heroic work by LFS developers. However, the fact is very clear. The workload is almost insane. If there is nothing to do about it, then let it be what it is to be. Very sad news indeed, Bruce. Can't help feeling that this will be on the card since the UDEV functionality started requiring all the extra packages need to extract it from the Systemd sources. Pottering already had a lot to answer for, seems now we can add LFS to his rap sheet. From a separate thread, initially seeming unrelated, I was just about to restart work on this when I read that bombshell news about drop support for SysV. What an unfortunate and blatantly wrong decision. Very disappointing and demotivating. To me, it seems pointless now to contribute to this project anymore, so I drop out of this thread here, and this would be one of the very rare occasions where I did not conclude what I had started. Thanks for your work and efforts. And from a separate person, I was hoping I could avoid the discussion, but at this point I feel like I should raise my voice too. I'm happily following LFS in a way since decades. I haven't contributed all that much, but I'm a huge fan of your system, your rules. So basically, I'm build my system and really appreciate all your effort, teaching, etc. to allow me to do that. And I only contribute when I have the feeling that whatever I found out about building my system could be ahead of or otherwise be beneficial for what you are doing officially. Guess it is rather safe to say now that I'll never switch to Systemd either, as long as I can avoid it in any way. I can't always, in my company, I have to deal with it, but it's a burden. I understand the theoretical benefit for complex scenarios, but often it is more like complicating instead of solving problems for me. Yes, it is, for example, caring about magically restarting crash services, but may easily do so with the wrong parameters or credentials, which is way harder to deal with than just a stuck or crashed service. That is something I can deal with, maybe craft a maintenance cron job around it or something. But that may well run into a race condition with Systemd trying to do it faster, but intransparently and unfortunately wrong. Then the service seems to be well running, but it is dysfunctional, happened to me more than once. I'm very aware I may not be speaking for a majority, but I would prefer to drop support for GNOME and Plasma. Again, you don't need to drop support for Plasma because they're not requiring Systemd. Due to Systemd, in favor of support for SysV or something else. Your system, your rules, your efforts. I'm not trying to convince anyone. That said, LFS are not losing me that easily. I'm deviating from the book anyway, as long as it helps me. Despite change focus, the project is welcome. Now, being a bit of a controversial change, this wasn't just going to happen and nobody would do anything. So there is a SysVinit continuation project. That is SysV LFS. This is actually where I showed you that Discord post from earlier. This is still a relatively new project. I don't know if it's going to continue long term. This is the problem with any sort of early fork. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it's really hard to say. Also, this is just for LFS, not for BLFS. So there is also not that follow-up book as well. Maybe that's also going to change. Who knows? Entirely possible. But again, work in progress. Also, because this is just SysVinit and not SysVinit and systemd, it's a lot less work, right? You don't have to test against systemd, test against all those files, have all those additional things knowing to be working. It's just SysVinit. It's much simpler. And having a single person or maybe another person joins on doing this isn't that much of an endeavor. Yes, things are going to change, but for the most part, build instructions don't really change. There's a couple of things here and there. Maybe you want to cherry pick some patches, but for the most part, this shouldn't be a major endeavor. And I'm sure that's part of the reason this is not also BLFS, because BLFS is where you start seeing the big changes. The main LFS book is just about getting a system up and running. When you start dealing with desktops and things like that, that's where a lot of the more frequent changes happen, and where a lot of the more frequent breakages happen. I think the foundational problem we have here is the project is trying to serve two very different groups of people that have very different goals, but doesn't have the manpower to actually make it happen. So on one hand, you have people that use it as an educational tool, who want to go through all of the steps to get a working system, to learn how all of that fits together. They're not necessarily going to daily drive it, they're not necessarily going to use it long term, but it's something that they're going to come to, they're going to show their friends, and they're going to use as a way to understand how things fit together. On the other hand, there are people that want a real usable system. And I was informed that there's apparently some level of professional usage of LFS. And in that setting, you basically want systemd. Now, obviously, for a lot of other people, they're going to use SysVinit, and that's going to be their production system. But when we are talking about purely education, SysVinit generally makes more sense for teaching how the boot process works. Because systemd, whilst it's really good, it does a lot of things for you. SysVinit forces you to actually think about what is happening and understand what your system is doing. Now, for someone who's just using it for education and nothing else, when you do BLFS, it doesn't really matter which desktop you pick. Yeah, you're probably going to pick the one that you personally use, but you're not going to use the system long term. It doesn't really matter. But if you want this to be your main system, if you daily drive LFS, you're going to want the desktop you want to be supported, to have instructions. And whilst there are fixes for some of the problems that are coming up, there's gonna be more problems in the future, and there's not really a solution for SysVinit right now, so that involves creating your own solution, because basically no one is using SysVinit. Anyone who's not on systemd generally goes with OpenRC. So there's this, whole mess, and whilst it would be nice if they had more people working on the project to keep both versions of the book supported, maybe even add an extra OpenRC version, this has the same problem that Debian has, which is not many people are that excited about working on the project, right? LFS is a very niche and very sort of specific kind of project. If you want to get involved in a Linux distro, it's probably not the project that you first think about. You're probably going to think about, a Fedora or an Arch Linux or something like that, and it leaves LFS in this position where they would like to do more. They would like to keep everything they do well documented. But there's not enough people to make that happen at a reasonable pace. Obviously, you could slow down, release the book at a slower pace, and things would be fine. But if it's at a slower pace, then there's less people that are going to be interested, because a lot of people nowadays like relatively up-to-date things, and obviously the point of LFS is to teach the baseline and then you diverge from it. But again, if you're using it as an educational tool, you're never going to stick around long enough to even do that divergence. Basically, there wasn't really a good choice here. No matter what you do, someone was going to be disappointed because, again, they didn't have the work to do everything. So, let me know. Have you done LFS? Are you an LFS user? What are your thoughts on this change? Are you happy about it? Are you sad about it? Are you going to stop using LFS? I'd love to know. Maybe get involved in the SysV LFS book. Let me know down below. If you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well, and if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to Therapy, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and
something like this.